the smell of grass and leather. There were days when we'd play too. We'd cross the lines when the sun would shine and make our dreams come true. I had a glove on my hand and a girl in the stands. She stole my heart like a hit and run. It seems the world was so much simpler back then. We was just out there for fun. I pray for someone to hold your hand, and baseball in the summer. Someone to walk with you when this world grows cold. Baseball in the summer. Baseball in the summer.
Hi there, welcome to the Brock VMAC Legendary Rivals podcast, and here is one that we absolutely had to have. You know, there is a bunch out there that we need, but a few that we have to have, and we are here with another guy that looks like he found the fountain of youth, for crying out loud, Coach Jeff Lounsbury. Jeff, welcome to the podcast. Why don't we just start this off with a really simple, we know you're busy, you're doing a million things, but how are you feeling and how are you doing these days?
Oh, thanks for having me, first of all, Michael, and I'm glad you're doing this. It's definitely deserved. The group of 95 and 96, those guys were pillars of that baseball franchise, but I'm doing well. Health is good. Cancer is in remission. I had stage 3 colon. I had the chemo. I have some side effects in the feet, neuropathy, which will never go away. I'll live with it. But still going well, still involved in baseball, still plugging away in the IBL. Won't be doing the OE with Laurier this year, but so it'll be a year without OE baseball for me. But I'm going to travel, do like Briggsy, traveling around all over the place. We're doing Italy this fall, my wife and I, and that's a long time planned trip for us. So that's going well. I'm still working the full-time job that was so kind enough to allow me to coach ball. So I'm past my retirement age. I can go at any time, but I'm going to do probably another 2.5, 3 years.
It's outstanding, and we're excited to hear that you're feeling great. I mean, colon cancer is a theme that runs through this fundraising weekend that we are putting together because it unfortunately took the life of the McMaster second baseman Brad Reason, who we all have had.
Go get screened.
Yeah, and it's so important. And I can say this now because it came up during the Chris Peters podcast. But Brad was a guy that monitored his diet from his high school years through and retired playing senior baseball at 26 and started running triathlons. There is not anyone that could be more healthy from a diet perspective, but that had nothing to do with the onset of colon cancer. And it's a highly personal story I talk about, but I asked him when he was in the hospital the last time, about 3 months before he passed away. I was there for about 12 hours, just staying the night with him. And I asked him, I said, the healthiest guy I know, how did you end up with colon cancer? Yeah. And he turned to me and he said, Mike, it's anxiety and stress. And these are contributing factors, and you just don't know. And I'm sure that when you were diagnosed, you're kind of like, how on earth did this happen,
Yeah. Looking back, I turned 50 years old, and the government sends you a little letter and says, go get screened. And it probably took almost a year. I was almost 51, I think, by the time I actually got in my appointment. And I had zero symptoms, felt fine. My wife and I joking about, office jokes about, how can we make it more comfortable? You know what I mean? Like, and giggling about it all. And then she knew right away something was wrong. My situation was different than everybody else, and she got brought in, and she knew right away something was wrong. And he's like, "Yeah, this is that stage. It's there, and we got cut it out of you right away." And that happened on, I think, Monday. I was in surgery by Friday. got it out of me. Chemo started basically the next Friday, and that's how fast. Yeah, and baseball had a lot to do with my recovery. I can talk about that a little later on when we get into IVL talk, but my wife noticed a big difference, and she thanks baseball for keeping me sane through it all and helped. But yeah, go get screened, guys. All the hot dogs us ball players eat, that don't help. And a lot of the ex-Brock guys are into coaching. I know Colin Tyler and so many guys. Ben Anderson and a bunch of them are all coaching. There is a stress to that job at a high level. So get yourself tested.
Well, that's let's start with the love of baseball, and way before there was a Brock team, or you grew up in Niagara Falls. Tell us a little bit about your childhood, and was baseball a passion from when you were very young, or is it something you grew into?
Yeah, right from the beginning, I remember playing squirt. I was the youngest kid on the team. I had to play 3 years of like the first level. My neighborhood, all very athletic neighborhood I came from, and I played a year before I could even play. They brought me out, and I remember my third year in that league, I'm hitting bombs, and because I've been playing 3 years, right? But Rob Butler, who I work with really well now, he has the same story as me. We were kids that sat in our bedroom and listened to the games on radios and scored. You know what I mean? Listening to the Blue Jay broadcasts. Alfredo Griffin and Bob Baylor were two guys that right away that I followed, and that love of scorekeeping and following the game. It was right there right from the beginning. I played. I can remember getting cut from my midget team because I hurt my elbow in the winter that year. Playing wall ball. It was a thing in our neighborhood. We had a school with a square box and we'd go play, and all the kids in that neighborhood played it, and a lot of good ball players from that neighborhood, Cherrywood Acres. And funny story, my uncles and my dad were the ones that actually put the box on the school many years before that. So the Lounsburys had a lot to do with that. And then I got cut, and I remember my parents didn't even know I went to the tryouts because I couldn't throw. I was told by the doctor you can't go. I went anyways, and the coach goes, "Don't worry, Jeff, you'll make the team. Don't throw when you can." And then at the end of tryouts, I still wasn't throwing, and he cut me. And I went home crying, and I was so upset. And my parents didn't even know I was going. And I called the coach, and I said, "Why'd you cut me?" He goes, "You can't throw." And I go, "You told me not to throw it till I could." He goes, "Oh, you can throw?" I go, "Yeah." So I went to the next practice and threw, which I couldn't, but I threw, and I threw through it and through the pain and everything else. But so I made the team. By the end, I'm captain of the team. You know what I mean? And it goes. So that's kind of was. And my age group, there wasn't a lot of players. McCray was a year younger than me. There was a lot of really good ball players 2 years above me. Ricky Falkner was a year above me. My age was only me and one other guy, basically, that played through it. So I was kind of the captains of Mike McCray when we played through midget and junior. We're both midget players moving up to junior, and Mike's dad was our coach, and I was a captain of Mike McCray's dad's team, and and then I went to junior, and after the 2 years, and in the third and fourth year of juniors, I was a captain of that team. And the only difference was I had found a full-time job when I was 19 years old and finished playing junior while having a full-time job, or basically a full-time job, which was bizarre at that time.
Yeah, that would put you at a maturity level that's not there for most junior players.
Well, I wasn't mature.
So I have a good question for you. What was it like playing for Mike McCray's dad?
Allie was a great man. I loved Allie. And Nicky Cuviello's father. I can't remember Nicky's father's name, but Nicky Cuviello played the same age as Mike. His dad was the other coach. Those two guys were great guys. Allie was tough too. But he had a real nice sense of humor to him. He was a good man, and I was different. As I know we all joked about the Lounsbury hair and earring and everything else back in the day. And Mike was straight. Mike looks the same now as he did when he was friggin' 18 years old. It was a very different, contrasting personalities, but Mike and I were pretty good friends. We didn't even go to the same high school. We're age groups, but we actually coached hockey together, believe it, in high school.
Okay.
Mike needed a credit. Typical Mike needed something, needed help, called me, and me and Mike actually coached hockey together. I have that picture, and I have curly Bon Jovi hair. And Mike is, you know, the, you know,
He kind of looks like
New Order
like a
punk.
military recruit, right?
Yeah,
Like Mike kind
yeah.
of looks like the guy you would put on a Marine, U.S. Marines recruiting poster.
Yeah. He was definitely the Cure New Order preppy kid, and I was definitely a long haired freaky guy. But we got along well. We always did get along well. It was fun. We coached hockey together, and then the baseball thing. I was working full time. Mike was at school, come back from school, and wanted to get into coaching, and called me up and said, "Hey, let's start this midget all-star Niagara District youth baseball team." And I think it was in '93, and I said, "Sure." And like again, I'm working full time. I'm 4 years into my career. 3 years, I started in December '88 or '89. And I'm full-time job, playing slow pitch with my guys from work, playing hockey with guys from work, playing men's hockey. I'd already transitioned into like adulthood. And Mike goes, "Let's coach this team." And I had a blast. And, and that's basically, we did 2 years of that. And then Mike transitioned. He was looking for full-time work as a teacher. He was a part-time teacher at the time, and he was starting to transition into what was going to pay and what was going to make him some money. But believe it or not, like his wife Michelle, God bless her. I lived with Mike and Michelle, and I can remember being in Mike's Jeep when he's playing IBL baseball, and we'd be going up together and getting Taco Bell in Hamilton. He loved Taco Bell, and we'd. Yeah, it's crazy. McCray loved Taco Bell. Little unknown story. He would drive to Hamilton to get it on Mud Road there, Centennial Parkway. But anyways, yeah, that was how it started.
Wow, that's super interesting. I knew that you guys knew each other prior to, and it was kind of an awkward. Like Mike was hired after we had already started some of the workouts at Brock, so we had 3 different coaches. Briggs Jude was in there, and then we very quickly kind of figured out that the 2 other guys, one was from Welland and another one was from
Curtis.
Curtis, and I can't remember. Briggs Jude always gives me the gears. I can't remember if it was Smythe or some other S Sharp. Mm-hmm. It was either Sharp or Smythe, but it was an umpire from St. Catharines that was wanting to cut his teeth in coaching, and we needed an upgrade there. And after I did the podcast with Ted, I remember specifically when we interviewed Mike in the bottom of the Penn Center. So there was a pub in the bottom of the Penn Center, and
who went on to sponsor our team, by the way, for a few years.
Yeah, and the odd part about it was Mike looked ridiculously young. I think we can all acknowledge this, that Mike looks very young. And so he wasn't much older than Ted and I, truthfully, a couple of years. Yeah. But he got up to go to the washroom, and Ted, who has a great, it's not shocking that he went into psychology. Teddy turned to me and said, "This is the guy." And I was less, I was just kind of like, just reacting in the moment, and kind of thought, well, that's great, but I don't know whether we can get him. And so he came in about halfway through the winter workouts, and I believe that you were brought on in the summertime period between the winter workouts and training camp. Do you remember what your first conversation was with Coach McCray about the Brock program?
Yeah, Mike kind of briefed me on it because we were doing midget again, like we're doing together. I knew he was at Erie. I think he went to Erie that year. Yeah. So we stopped doing the midget team. I just kind of went on with what I was doing. And he told me about it, and he said, I want to bring you on, but I got to be patient, and we got to go through the flow of this. He goes, I want you to come on board and be my infield coach and third base kind of thing. And I understood that. I trusted Mike, and I'm like, okay, you let me know. And he goes, "You're going to have to interview." And all right, you're going to have to go through that process. And at that time, anything Mike would ask me to done, I would have done it for him. I mean, I coached with the guy in hockey and ball, and every time his whole coaching career minus Erie, and I guess he was involved with Team Ontario too at that time. He was starting to do Team Ontario stuff with Ricky Johnson and that group, and a couple of times Mike brought me out to those things too, once or twice, but. I just knew I just was there to support Mike, right? If Mike asked me to do it, I was going to do it. So,
did you have any exposure to the other coaches? So, a couple of them are Niagara Falls guys, Tim
Yeah.
Tappan and Daryl Kemp, for sure.
I knew Tim a little bit through our period of time. I knew the Burtons really well, which is another family of baseball in Niagara Falls that was helping me and Mike along with the Burton family, and I knew Tim a little bit. I knew Daryl, of course. I was very timid. I was scared the hell of Daryl. Just scared. He absolutely, even though he's a likable, big, fun-loving guy with a great sense of humor, he still scared the living shit out of me. I don't know. We were never close. There was a difference to that, but I respected him, and but I knew who he was, definitely.
Yeah, Daryl has a presence on the field, and I think I tell this story quite often, but I had to play with Daryl in the summer, and so you're right, he's a big, imposing guy, but I had just come out of a couple of years of junior where playing against a lot of the top players in the province. I would just always start every at bat with the same pitch. It was kind of an outside fastball where I would let it run, and most people couldn't hit it. And but we had to throw live batting practice to Daryl Kemp, and I threw it to him once, and he swung over it, and then I threw it again, and I think it's still traveling really to this day. And I couldn't believe that he had taken a hack like that because I hadn't seen anyone do that. And he was he was a big, intimidating guy, but great sense of humor and always trying to help. He would say to me, Mike, here's kind of maybe how you want to approach that. Or, he'd always have a little tip. And the hard part is when don't have a lot of exposure to him, it comes in very small bite like form, and Colin and I were talking about this, Colin Tyler, about how Coach Kemp would just give it to you in small little bites so you could kind of absorb what it is that he was going to say. So very interesting to hear that there was you're feeling a little bit intimidated, probably because of Daryl's playing career more than anything, right? He played,
and Mike and his relationship was different. Also, too, with Daryl, he's got such a dry sense of humor. So sometimes he's making a joke, and you have to wait a second. Is he joking, or is he kind of ragging you? You weren't 100% sure. He had a it took a while to pick up on that on his personality. It just took a while, and I didn't know him very well. And Briggsy, I didn't know Briggsy at all. But man, I love that guy too.
Yeah, he's like everybody's uncle. I mean,
I couldn't have done it without him over the years. So.
For sure. So let's pick that up. I mean, clearly you have a great friendship with Coach McRae, and I think we'll talk a little bit about the dynamics of that, how hard that was coming into a training camp where there was a team that had survived these indoor workouts. We head to training camp, and very few of us, I would say you could count on one hand, knew that there was going to be an influx of these other players now that had been recruited in. So as Colin brought up in his podcast, part of it was the shock factor of the people who had survived the indoor workouts coming, and all of a sudden there's a guy like Jeff Hoover standing at third base. There's Andrew Tinish. But, the other thing is you're now showing up as a coach. People don't know that that's coming. And Coach McRae comes in with a very, that training camp was hard.
Yeah.
Okay. And so the players are feeling like your Mike's drill sergeant a little bit. Did you feel a little bit intimidated by the environment, or tell me a little bit about how you're
No,
thinking?
the training camp me and Mike put together. Like Mike put it together, and I'd go to his house after work, and training camp was boom, 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 and there was input put in by myself a lot in that. It wasn't any surprise. I guess the surprise was as soon as I got hired, Mike sent me recruiting. He brought in Rick Bottomley from Team Ontario. Juice came from Erie, where Mike was. I was sent to go look for a shortstop in Ottawa. Andrew Tinish, I'm sure he's going to tell the story. Tinish played. Tinish played in that tournament. I saw him. He went 1-for-4 with a double. I kept the little recruiting card that I had from that forever. I didn't report back to anything because we weren't looking for outfielders at the time. He flew a little bit under the radar. From that tournament, though, turned into that tournament that I was sent to Ottawa turns into Dan Barrable, Matt Barrett. It turns into a ton of players. Grant Giffen. It turns into those guys. That's the tournament that I would go to for many, many years. But also, I remember sitting there with Duncan McDonald, who was a Blue Jay scout at the time. And Duncan McDonald sitting with me, and I'm there from Brock. He goes, who are, and that's right away. Brock University, we're here to recruit. And we're here, and this is what we're doing. And it right away set us here. Right. And then McRae sends me to Guelph, and I'm following the Silver Creeks and Oshawa Legionnaires right away. Best 2 junior programs in Ontario. Boom. I'm on their doors. I'm going to watch ball games, and all those tournaments and that stuff really leads to what we did and how we built the team. Now training camp, I can remember the day before training camp, the night before. I'm going to tell this story. This is the best Andrew Tinish story. I've told it before. I've told it a million times. Best Andrew Tinish story ever. I think I worked at 8:00 that night, or I had a slow pitch game or something. I came to McRae's house, 9:00. We used to play Stratomatic baseball too. Me and Mike played Stratomatic baseball together, like for hours. And we'd be there. And so we're ready to do training camp. I get there. It's late at night. Michelle's there. And we're talking about training camp. And Mike gets a phone call. And it's Tinish. And he goes, hi, my name's Andrew Tinish. I'm going to Brock. I want to try out. I went to tryouts. I just got home from the Nationals or the OBAs or whatever the hell's going on, right? And McRae goes, well, it's 11:00 at night right now. We start at 9:00 in the morning. Boom, boom, boom at this ballpark, and that's it. And he goes, that's when training camp starts. And anyone that wanted to try out would have gotten that information 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, 4 weeks ago, right? It was open. You want to try out? Boom. Here's the information. We'll see you there. So we have everything lit. Everything's written down. Every hitting group, every name, everything's done. So McRae hangs up the phone, and we're going, we'll see how much that guy wants to play. So when we showed up in the morning, and we were up early, we were there early, setting up for first day of training camp at Brock Baseball. Andrew Tinish is asleep in his car. He got in his car, drove from Ottawa into the ballpark there, and was sleeping in his car. And he come out, and we were going, Andrew Tinish here. And right away, that night, right after practice, we saw him play. First day, that's the guy. We had that discussion. Yeah, Daryl Houston, Larry Houston, all those Rick Bott, that's the guy. We knew right away, that it's going to be something special. We knew, that was what it was. But training camp was great. I know the first basemen talk about. I think you remember that. We lined up all the first basemen. We could not make up our mind. We knew Colin Tyler was the hitter. We had Chris Peters, a young ball player, Jess Dixon, Chris Grucci, and there was another guy there. I don't know who the fifth guy was. And McRae goes to me, go take a bucket of balls, and I want you to destroy baseballs down to first base. And everyone sat, because we could not make up our mind what we wanted to do at first base. We had to make a cut. We knew we had to make a cut. And it was obvious Colin was going to be the DH out of that group, but he was he was getting the ground balls hit to him. And my hands were bleeding. We're just crushing baseballs, and everyone stopped and watched. And I think everybody knew what was on the line. And And I think that set the tone, right? That sets the tone. And maybe that's why guys are scared. I'm going to get cut. I'm going to get cut. Because that set a tone. And we knew right away, Just Dixon can pick it. He was the guy. Grucci was second best hitter, probably second best defensive guy. And we all thought Chris Peters was better than all of them, but he was young. Right? And we thought Chris Peters should be the best one out of the group. And then we cut the other guy who was a big kid, too. It was a big boy, but Colin hit the ball just far better. So we kept Colin as that. And that's that tone, right? So,
I recall there were 6 of them, actually.
Was there 6?
There was so I won't name the two. The 2 biggest ones are the ones that got cut, actually. Yep. The one guy was scouted, but it put on his player application. He came from the gym workouts. He put that he was scouted by the Reds. And you could see why. The guy was a huge...
Yeah, it was a huge kid.
Monster kid. And then the other one was a starting first baseman for either Oakville or a team in Mississauga. And a hell of a good guy. But, from my perspective, what I remember a little bit was a little slow of hand and slow with the bat. And that would have been a problem against the U.S. teams or the better Canadian teams.
Well, JD makes the team out of that, right? Like, and you figure in 96, if it's not for JD, 96, 97, man, that team don't survive. No. So what a moment. There are other crazy things about the training camp we've talked about. Some of the drill. I mean, everyone remembers the drills, heavy balls for the pitchers and towel drills and all these things that none of us had ever seen. Yeah. Breaking down at first base, things that no one was doing back then.
Yeah, way ahead of the curve, actually. Yep. You think about it with the Jays using the heavy ball. It's only about 10 years ago now where they went through that phase of signing free agents, and all of a sudden they pick up 3 or 4 miles an hour, and that was all due to the use of heavy ball. But we were using it 30 years ago.
Yep.
And so really interesting dynamic. I think we had the practice field in Thorold, and then the great stadium. Actually, I don't think anyone talks enough about the city of St. Catharines allowing us to use Community Park at a pretty good rate, like a discounted rate at the time. But that was important, I think, to having a good program, because some of the other, particularly Canadian programs, I can remember played at substandard fields and stuff. And it was great to have a great park like that as a home base.
Yeah. Yeah. We bounced back and forth for a few years until that got settled in. Yeah. We had to use, I want to call Thomas Street, but I'm not sure if that's the name of the park now. Hague Bowl, hockey rink in the background there. We had to use that for about 3 or 4 years too, and eventually got back to Community Park. And Thorold was nice, but it wasn't. It didn't.
You couldn't play games there.
Yeah, that was always a little bit of an issue, but City St. Catharines, we had to learn. Briggsy helped me with that a lot. Massaging the city of St. Catharines. I didn't know how that stuff worked.
Yeah. Well, let's dive into the season now. And you're right. We had unexpected depth. I'm sure the cuts at first base were tough. Catching was also, at the time anyway, prior to Nate getting hurt, thanks to our friend the Birdman. We had a lot of catchers too, and usually you have a hard time filling those positions, or there's not a lot of depth in those positions. Tell me a little bit about what you guys felt about the team coming out of camp.
Yeah, so when we come to camp, the injury bug hit us quick. Daryl got hurt pretty quick. Nathan Kapusa's injury, because at the time he was supposed to be I didn't know much about Nathan, but it was obvious that he was going to be a very good player. Now, I guess the good news about that is we learned really, really fast. We had another very, very good catcher. And that gave Matt Fletcher a great opportunity, which, again, leads to us 5 years of success on the field because of what Matt Fletcher. So we definitely quickened his pace. And I think it was Matty King was the third kid. And he didn't get a chance to play that much, but that's a credit to Fletcher. He was just such a bulldog. And we, and you figure, Juice and Tinish and Bots and Daryl and Larry, and, there the guys at first base, we had so many good players. I learned something from that is you can never have enough depth.
Wow.
Because at the end of the day, the injury to Kapusa probably cost us. We forced him in Montreal. We probably shouldn't have. Daryl never really got going because of the injury. Pitching staff, Todd gets hurt. Ronnie Strau is struggling a little bit, I think, with some injuries late. Gartz was never really dominant. And I learned right then is don't be afraid of having more depth, and that carried me later on. I learned a valuable lesson there. What you start with and what you end with could be two different things.
Yeah, I think one of the real interesting things is right near the end of camp, Chris Ebel brings a guy named Steve Vatour on board. And
Gypsy.
We'll talk to Steve about how he nicknamed got the nickname Gypsy. But, just a great tool, actually, a guy that we were maybe not as deep at short, actually.
Right.
And so he became a starting shortstop and a pretty lights out closer type of pitcher. So that was a real interesting addition near the end of camp. And so we break camp. And you guys did a great job of putting together a schedule of American teams to complement the, and I can easily say this now in retrospect, the kind of rather uneven talent that was in the Canadian side of the schedule. And a lot of teams and programs in Upper New York State we ended up playing. Tell me a little bit about the process of putting together the schedule, because I'm sure you were involved with Mike with that.
Yeah. Mike was able to use a lot of his contacts with being at Erie. Really forced the hand of some of the schools and really pushed. He pushed. I think after year one, they were so surprised with how talented we were and how good we played. And, it's kind of funny. Like years later, you're talking about career stats and Chris Ebel and his ERA is 4.5 and his wins aren't there. It's because the guy pitched against D1 schools and U.S. schools. We didn't pitch him against a Canadian school to the end. So it's a little unfair in an aluminum bat era. It's a little unfair for Chris because Chris's numbers would have been disgusting if he just pitched against Guelph like every weekend. So he allowed us to do that, though. You know what I mean? It was the depth of pitchers like Chris that allowed us to do that and led us to be competitive right away. And he got it. He understood it. And the players get better with playing against better competition. It was a real key thing, I think, in the progress. This is what we're going to do. This is what Brock is going to do. We're going to play 36 games. We went 23-13 year one, 36 games. And that was what we're going to play 36. We're going to play, and this is how we were going to recruit. And that's how we're going to use that as a recruiting tool. Paying for it turned into a whole another issue. But that's what we're going to do. We're going to strive to play U.S. schools. And then, of course, we played D1. We played St. Bonaventure. We ended up playing Canisius a lot over the years, Niagara over the years, Erie. We did a tournament with Durham College, right? With Durham, Erie, Onondaga, and ourselves. And how many years in a row did we win that thing? And that was that's how we're going to do business. It got to a point, though, where a lot of them wouldn't play us anymore. Like, it got to a point where Erie or Onondaga, they're recruiting the same players, and we're beating you. And that ain't good, right? To lose to this Canadian school. So it was always moving, always changing. I can remember us beating Canisius one year, 18-13, and that was the end for Don Colpoys. Like that was the end of his career. Losing to a Canadian school. We beat Ernie Witt. I remember beating Ernie Witt. Oakland's. I think he was at Oakland's or Macomb. Maybe it was at Macomb. He was at Macomb, and we beat them. And we beat Ebel through a shutout. We beat him 8-0 and 3-0, I do believe. And we were on the bus going home or in the vans going home, and they're running. They didn't score a run against a Canadian school for 2 games, right? And I remember having Ernie Witt on my answering machine back. That's dating myself with an answering machine, but Ernie Witt was on my answering machine for 2 months. I wouldn't take it off. He's Jeff Lounsbury, Ernie Witt calling. Just and then of course I ran into Ernie years later, and I'm like, I'm 2-0 against you. I tell Rob Butler that story too, and Rob laughs because he knows Ernie really well.
Yeah, it's that's an interesting thing to hear. And I you kind of saw it at points in the first year. I remember the infamous game at St. Bonaventure, which is a beautiful place to go play, right? It's right at the foot of the mountains. But, that was one where we jumped out to a big lead against a guy that came from Durham named Vance Kozier, who was pitching.
Yep, I remember that.
For St. Bonaventure. But the home plate umpire came down with a case of, I don't remember whether it was chest pains or stomach or something, and they replaced him with a guy that in a St. Bonaventure alumni jacket, and all of a sudden our pitchers couldn't throw strikes, and Coach McRae went in, he rightfully got upset and stood up for the team, and kind of laid out a great one-liner on the umpire as he was getting ejected. So, it was...
Was that the kiss me? Is that the kiss me line?
Yeah.
Right, yeah.
And
he's used it before, though.
Has he? So this was the first time Oh, did he? So there were some obvious signs that people were shocked that we were that good, and then a little bit of gaming, the system there in the first year, and I'm sure you guys put up with it in subsequent years. Here's a really interesting question. As you're progressing through the year, are there any players that stood out because you developed a different kind of relationship with them, either because they were struggling or they were having a hard time balancing school and baseball, or it's always easy to focus on the people who are having great years, but some that were not.
I think that's the evaluation of a lot had to do with me, like with the infielders. We had Steve, and we knew he was missing school and not getting to class. We didn't know how that was going to work. We didn't know. We didn't know what the school rules were. We didn't know how long. You know what I mean? Like, we know we start to hear he's sleeping on couches and not going to class, and we really didn't know the balance, and we weren't sure on who to ask or who to talk to. You know what I mean? We just didn't have that structure or that infrastructure in yet. Bob Davis was helping us out in a lot of ways, but we didn't know where to go. And then you had kids like Simmons and for me, remember, I'm working full time. Briggsy's working full time. Like all of a sudden, all that first year with 36 games, practices every day, and full time jobs, it was a real learning curve on us as well. Never mind just the kids. And then I forget how friggin' young we were. I felt at the time I was old, but I wasn't. I was 3-4 years old, and how much older was I than Chris Ebel? Because me and Chris played hockey against each other for years with the Kitchener Police Department. And I realized how close we were in age. And you forget that. I'm still learning. We relied Mike. Mike's still the head guy, but it was weird. We didn't know exactly what we could say, what we could do. I'm still learning my baseball coaching chops, at that age group, because I'd come from a younger group, even in the midget there. It took a while, and it was a big learning curve, but the whole process was a learning curve. We had a team full of freshmen, right?
We did, other than the pitching staff, and I think the other thing is there were a couple of factions, and I've said this before. There was the Oshawa group, who were 5 deep on the team, and the Burlington group, who were 6 or 7. Ryan Thompson was part of that. So hard, because and I say this now, and the Burlington guys always take me to the woodshed for it, but the reality is, we were all playing, at least the Oshawa guys were all playing in the Leaside Metro League. So that is almost 100% guys that are going stateside. The teams are really deep. They're 5 or 6 pitchers deep. They're 7 good bats deep. So you have to pitch against that lineup. You got to hit against those lineups. all the players in the league know each other. We didn't know anything about the Burlington guys. Like, we knew about High Park, we knew about Leaside, we knew about those programs. And so they were a total mystery to us, and we were a mystery to them, because if we weren't seeing them at a limbs, we just would never cross paths. So there was a little bit of unfamiliarity amongst the players, and it made for some, at times, like, odd chemistry, right? Like
Yeah, and I think that was part of our learning curve, though. Like Ryan Thompson, all of a sudden he's not playing. You know what I mean? Like, that's the first time at that level where we had to deal with that kind of stuff, and you had the winning key, but development, boom, keeping kids happy, how to handle personalities, how to handle guys struggling in a short season, knowing that in the way it's so fast and furious, an 0 for 12 streak absolutely crushes a kid, right?
Yeah.
3 bad innings and you're buried. Or Robbie Green and all the stress, all of a sudden, like, Robbie's got to pitch through injury because he knows he may not get the ball again, because of somebody else. That's all part of the learning curve for us, right? That's stuff, we were able to do right away because we were competitive, we were strong, we were good, we had depth, we had talent, we had good coaching staff, we had good support. You know what I mean? We had good coaches. You had Kemp and all of them, like Timmy. Like, we all worked together at that. We all discussed that stuff. We were all learning at the same time. And even McRae, being a head guy, he was still pretty green.
Yeah, he was. It was hard. And I'll open up about it, because I'm going to bring up a conversation you had with Rob Green, because Rob and I still have a pretty good relationship to this day, and he talks to me about that you had a conversation with him, and look, it was hard for Rob. He was physically compromised the whole year. He had torn his rotator cuff, his labrum or something, and you went to him and said, you got to let it go. You got to just let it rip. And he said that stuck with him for the remainder of the year, and he was way better after you had that conversation with him, which is a real grown-up conversation to have with a guy that super respected, because he's in his, I think, his 4th year at Brock at that point. I really respect that, because, sometimes it's harder to call out a guy that's seen as a leader and a vet than it is someone that's young. But it was hard for the pitchers in particular, because Coach McRae was a pitcher. So he would have this standard, and we would sometimes get defined by when you're pitching staff, there's definitely slotting, but I've talked in a couple of other podcasts where I would have to follow a brutal performance on the mound, and you would feel the weight of, hey, our pitchers just walked 9 guys in a game, and Coach McRae yelled at me after the second pitch in a game to throw strikes, because the previous game was horrible. Now, it ended up being fine at the end of the day, but it was an intense motivator for us not to let you guys down. And at the same time, you're trying to get a handle on these people you've never seen perform on a field before. So I feel that maybe with some of them, and I'll use Chris Peters as an example. His year at Brock was maybe the worst year of his baseball career. He'll freely admit it. I played with him a couple of years in Oshawa, and he was a great player. He just couldn't ever get to a point of comfort because of the four first baseman rotation at first. Yep. He was a guy that needed to be out there a lot. And Colin, who I played with after Brock, only had about a third of the at-bats of some of the
60 at-bats.
Yeah, of the high-end guys, Larry and Jeff Hoover and these kinds of folks. And, Colin is a guy, the more you play with him, the more you see him, the better it sits with you, the more it sits. So I think you're right. I think everyone was kind of learning as we went along over the course of the year.
Yeah, 100%. And the great thing about it, I guess, is we were successful. And I guess that takes us to the almost the end of the year where it flips, right? McRae leaves, half the team leaves.
Yeah. we'll get there in a second,
Yeah.
Jeff. What I do want to talk about, and I think a lot of the players will want to ask about this, is, first off, we go through the situation with Todd, where we have an injury that takes someone out, and not only takes them out of a season where they're emotionally invested, but also it was scary.
Yeah.
And, I talk a lot about how the coaches always absorbed the great attitude guys. There were a few of them that really stood out: Jess Dixon and Todd and Matty King, you brought up earlier, who got all the, he was basically a bullpen catcher guy that always
Yeah.
did it
I
with a
think he went 1
smile.
for 10 or 0 for 10.
Yeah. But he had to catch some, and look, being one of them, but I maybe was a little bit, but catching Ron or catching Joel when his curveball was hitting the dirt, that must have sucked in the bullpen, and yet he would still come up with a smile and a positive attitude. So we have these positive attitude guys, Todd being one of them. Tell me a little bit about what you remember of the situation with Todd's eye.
Yeah, it was scary because I never in a million years would have thought it would turn out the way it turned out, right? But I don't even think we had a trainer, right? Like the school, no one was prepared for something like that, and Mike and I, we were with first aid training, and you know what I mean. We're ready to deal with sprains and that kind of stuff, right? This injury was definitely scary. It shows how quick it can be, and I think in hindsight, not taking things for granted, and you never know when something can change, right? Like, again, another learning curve for a bunch of young coaches at the time, on how quick things can change on a dime, and how to handle that as a group, how to regroup, how to rally around it, and then try to still support Todd, right? Like, but we didn't know. Like, it was, I'm not sure of the time frame of injury to result of injury, of the seriousness of it, from thinking, oh, this is just a goose egg, you know what I mean? Like, it'll whatever it is will heal a concussion, you know what I mean, to the actual extent of losing sight, is a little more, dramatic and life changing for Todd. We had no idea, I mean, like, that's where, I guess we probably, as a coaching staff, relied on Wayne and Daryl a little bit more on that kind of stuff. Just the rally and how do we just keep moving forward and keep going on. Bench players, that was what I did. I was a 10 position player. Like, I caught Rick Faulkner, like, one hitter. Like, I wasn't a catcher, but I'd catch. I was a 9 position guy. So I had real good understanding of how important bench guys are and how important role and depth guys are. It's because it's who I was as a midget playing junior or first year junior playing on a really good team. I was the guy that whoever wasn't there, I filled in for. That was my job. So I had a real good understanding of that. Now, the good thing, here's something that did come out of those first years with training camp. Mike McRae and we talked about it as a coaching staff. Coaching staffs always argue about the last guy. Always. Who are we keeping as our 25th guy, right? And and that's, everyone's got a point. No one talks about the 18th guy, the 16th guy, they're boom, 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 first guy. It's the 25th guy that everyone has an opinion on. I want this guy. I want this guy. And McRae says, you know what? If you screw up who your 25th guy is, you screw up your whole team. Because the 25th guy, if you pick the wrong guy, he's going to get the 24th guy in his ear, and he's going to get the 23rd guy in his ear, and he's going to get the 22nd guy in his ear. And all of a sudden, you got 4 guys that are fucking destroying you from the inside. Right? And all of a sudden, now you get a divided team. Right? You go, so whoever we pick for 3 at-bats, bullpen catcher, 5 innings, it's got to be the right guy here. Even though, so we may have cut guys, and later on in my years, I know for a fact, I cut guys that I knew were better, or cut guys that were better than the guy I kept, but it would have been the wrong team decision in the big picture. And we learned that. I learned that right away from McRae, and that's why we talked about that all the time. You got to make sure. So some years when you cut a fourth year player, and you're not going to be happy being the third string catcher now. It's going to be it's going to be worse now. I just got to do it. I got to pull the Band-Aid off and go with someone else. And it was a lesson. Yeah, it works sometimes. Sometimes it's still hard, very, very difficult. But that's something that we talked about right away. And it's funny. We all talked about our last guys, those last cuts. And that's why Jess Dixon made the team. Yeah. That's another reason. Never mind the fact that he's gloved. We can play that kid defensively. In the 7th inning, 8th inning, he's going to throw batting practice. He's going to be there every game. We don't have to worry about him. We don't have to, you know what I mean? He's going to rally. Guys are going to love him. That's why Jess Dixon made the team, and we cut 2 other guys. Right? 100%. And depth. He could play second base. He can play second base. He can go play first base.
Yeah, so. It's great to hear that, because I mean, I think as a pitcher and being detached a little bit from the evaluation process, I helped with recruiting, obviously, and went to a lot of tournaments. But, again, for me, I wasn't focused on those kinds of things. I noticed it in the gym sessions early. You picked up attitude, and that's where I saw Todd, really stand out. Todd and Matt King were in those, and as was Rob, and Alex Harold was another guy that had a good attitude. These were, high character guys, and character makes a big difference. And all us Oshawa guys, had played on teams that in consecutive years were ranked number 1 in Ontario and then lost in the semifinals of eliminations because we had character issues on the team. Very super talented teams, but a lot of backbiting on playing time. And it can sink a team very quickly. And it's really interesting to hear that, because I think it will make the people that were there 30 years ago appreciate the fact that you guys noticed things like that, because it was sometimes tough. With Coach McRae had everything moving, and you guys had such productive practices. Everyone was in motion, lots of stuff happening. You kind of forgot about being able to show things like attitude, because most of it was, I have to perform at this particular point in time, or I have to do this well, or I have to get a hit here. So really interesting from that perspective. Jeff, let's move on to the national finals, because I think this is, I think the one question that would always come up, and I'm sure you've heard it before. So Matt Fletcher catches most of the year.
Yeah.
And Nate slides into a game against McGill, and I think hit a double, and we had a good game. But as a result, I think there may have been the calculation that Nate's now healthy, and you guys slide him into the final, and Matt sits. Was there a lot of debate about that particular choice at the time? And
there was a ton of debate.
Yeah, how do you look at it?
Were we wrong? Probably. If knowing now what Matt did that first year and how much we relied on him, Matt probably deserved to go. And me and Matt have talked about it over the years. It was always a sore spot with him, of course, and he's not wrong. But it wasn't one man's decision. It was not Mike's decision alone. It was a group conversation. At the end of the day, it's Mike's decision. At the end of the day, that's what matters, right? It's he's the boss, right? And we all gave our opinion. We all probably talked about it. I at the end of the day, I can't remember exactly how the whole conversation went. I remember where we were for that, and I know it was a long discussion, and it was it was discussed, and I know Briggsy was in there, and myself, and sure Timmy was in there. I don't think Daryl went to Montreal. But anyways, so it was a coaching decision that, of course, at the end of the day, that's when Mike's paid the big bucks to make those hard decisions, right?
and look at it, it's hindsight's 2020. The reality is you have to measure the success.
Right. If he goes 4 for 4 with 4 doubles and we win the ball game,
yeah,
right,
of course. And I think I think in retrospect, championship teams are not always measured by winning the championship at the end. It's how they carry themselves and the success and the foundation of the program that was laid there.
If I can, I don't remember the whole game in Montreal, but I'm pretty sure we had lots of opportunities to score runs in that game, and we didn't get the job done. And it wasn't down to one guy.
No, and that's par for the course for just about any baseball game that there is. With rare exception, occasionally you can get a bad start, okay, and that happens, and all of a sudden you're down 6 runs or 4 runs before you get started, and that's on that's the the cost benefit of being a pitcher generally is if you're willing to step into that spotlight, you better be prepared to understand that you're setting the tone for the game. But that was not the kind of game that it was. And the Laval team was pretty exceptional. Those 2 lefties, Plant and Shabbat, were as good as we had seen all year. And in fact, probably as good as anyone's seen Canadian baseball. Both of them were great. And, we have no reason to ever carry our heads down. The championship for Brock in 1995 was surviving the year, knowing that there were a ton of things going on behind the scenes that I've never opened up about. But, if we had to try to have this thing not be so far in debt that there would be no future. We had lots of turnover at the end of that first year, lots of kids that graduated. Now that we're digging into it, some of them got opportunities to go to the U.S., there were, Ted and I got the opportunity to go run the sport for a year in Toronto. And so there's a great deal of uncertainty. And I remember this, we haven't brought this up on the podcast, but we had a meeting where Mike had a meeting at the end of the year, and he brought in an old summer teammate of mine, Ryan Schooley, to talk about what kind of program Brock was going to be moving forward. And it was all about living the American dream. And it's the only time I ever kind of got up and spoke in front of the team. And I got up afterwards and said, no, this is about Canadian student athletes and our commitment to providing a environment where Canadian athletes would have the choice of either playing in Canada or the U.S. The playing U.S. teams was great, but that this program would ultimately be defined as having a home for Canadian players. But now a lot of the leaders of the program are gone, and, you and Jess Dixon essentially are the 2 people that stepped up to save this program. Why don't you talk about the uncertainty after the first year and a little bit of what that was like?
Yeah, I remember the meeting when Mike said he was heading out, and Mike at the time was an unemployed teacher, right, looking to get full-time job. Brock paid nothing, and again, so Mike has to take care of his family. He's moving on with the next step. So Mike has to take care of Mike McCrae. So he leaves. We're all sitting there, and I know Daryl doesn't want to do it. I know Timmy isn't in a position to do it. It's probably down to me and Briggsy. You know what I mean? At the time, I'm third base coach. Briggsy's first base coach. I'm Mike's right hand man apparently. Like, you know what I mean? Like, so it one of those things, and I'm like, I guess it's gonna, and I've never been the head guy. Never been. I've always been good cop. Never had to be bad cop. And I stepped up. JD right away. We knew who was going to replace your and Ted's contributions. I don't even know if Bob Davis was involved in that. I don't even know if Bob had a say. I think we just went and told Bob, at the time, and said this is the change, and the finances I knew nothing about. I didn't know anything about any of that stuff. I just knew, later on, me and Jess have lots of meetings with a binder and budgets and budget lines, and Mary Lou, God bless her, she was so nice and so helpful. In walking us through that, and me walking through. And Bob did give me a lot of rope and a lot of help in doing that. But again, at the end of the day, here's this. It's 96. What am I? 24, 26? You know what I mean? Full-time job again. I don't know how I'm gonna do this. My first goal was to find myself a right-hand man and bring in Ricky Faulkner. This is a guy that that I played with and respected and knew he would be a good fit. So I had to start making hard decisions right away. Replace him for Tim. That was a tough decision right away. But I needed my comfort guy too, right? At the time, Daryl hung in there for a few years. Mark's still around as a kid, learning the curve, and we have to go with that. I think the hardest part though was from 95 to 96. Never mind the budget and the money and all that, is we had to replace half a team.
Yeah,
if not more.
Look,
you know what I mean?
You had one pitch. You had one pitcher out of a staff of 10 come back.
Yeah. Ebel is the only one basically, right? So we get Fabio right away, and I think Cheeseman comes in then too. I think Grant Giffen comes in, of course, who I recruited out of Brockville. That was the hardest part. Is we had Bottomley and Andrew and Colin and JD and Chris Grucci returning, but we were losing Hoover, and we're losing all the Houstons, and we're losing Juice, and Vatour's gone. You know what I mean? Like it was huge. And what do? We went 23-13 again, and lost in the final.
Well, again, and I know because we were administrating the league. You guys lost to Trevor Wambach in the Dalhousie team, who
went out of pro. Or he went to pro after that.
Yeah, he did. He signed with the Expos, and it took you a few years to get to a championship.
Yeah, 97 we lose to Mac. Finally, Mac gets us. Newton was a buddy of mine. I was working with Newton a little bit after. I'm playing hockey with Newton right after that, after he beats us. So he's working as a summer student with the Border. 97 they got us, and then I went to work. I went and coached the Welland Renegades with me and Rick Faulkner, and to get myself 60 games in the summer of experience of more head coaching experience, being a main guy, having to go through that. I remember coaching there. I remember coaching against a kid that played quarterback for the University of Michigan. He was out there. He played for the Yankees. Drew Henson was his name. I remember coaching against Drew Henson on a third base, and he's like, where are you going to play ball? Or where are you going to play? I'm going to play quarterback. That was all you cared about. But Jeremy Walker and Jared Haas come from that, and I learned a lot, again, just by doing the amount of baseball games, traveling. I don't know how I did it with my job, but me and Ricky driving out to Michigan every weekend. We'd be crossing each other. I could do Friday night. He'd have to work. I had to go work Saturday. We'd be driving and leaving the players in the care of a father. Brett Lawson's dad at the time, and it was crazy. But I did that for the program to learn, to get as much experience as I possibly could in dealing with personalities, because it was tough. A kid named Dougie Whiteside come in 96. I really struggled with Doug. I didn't know how to handle a kid like him. I just didn't have the experience to handle it. I didn't know. I didn't have the tools. Right, and to be honest,
Jeff, it takes a big person to admit that. I always, you reflect on your own personal experience, and sometimes you are blessed, as Ted and I were, to have a person like Ted Stone in our lives that taught us everything that you needed, gave you all the tools from a personality standpoint to be functional on the field. But those kinds of coaches are few and far between. The rest learn the job. Ted Stone pitched against Mickey Mantle. What are you gonna do when you have someone like that? You're just gonna absorb everything, and the respect is earned or granted. Other coaches have to earn the respect, and it's not easy because the coaching that you see in Canadian minor baseball is erratic, to say the least. Sometimes you'll have parents. Sometimes you'll have people that just have dated opinions and no idea what they're doing. And so, I say this as someone who's observed your coaching and administrative career at Brock and beyond that. It is immensely flatter. I wouldn't even say it's just a great strength that you worked yourself into being a great into a situation where you're a great coach and a great administrator and a great general manager. You worked your way into it, and that's a talent. That's a talent that people underestimate, because it's you bring up Darryl Kemp, which is a great example. Darryl worked really hard at everything too, but he was a natural at everything as well. And that's not the case for most people that are really good. They're not naturally talented. We've all played or coached people who are very naturally talented, but who never added up to the sum of their parts because they didn't have the talent of working hard. So I think it's super cool. And the program, you go on to win Brock's first championship as a coach. That must have felt incredibly satisfying. And was it, and the part B to that question, was it hard stepping out from the shadow of Coach McRae, whose philosophy cast a pretty high, cast a lot of shadow on the program? It was kind of like you have to step out from around that guy, and that's hard because Mike cast such a big, imposing shadow.
I think it became easier because half the team flipped over in '96. So Mark Cheeseman doesn't know who he is. Grant Giffen really doesn't know who he is. Matt Barrett or whatever, those guys that come in a little bit later for the 98, 98. Jeremy Walker and Jared Haas, I was their coach when they were a kid younger, right? So Ryan Villers, another Ryan Villers coach, played for me and McRae though. I don't think it was just, if Mike would have done 3 or 4 or 5 years, it would have been friggin' impossible. I think I got lucky that it was year one. Mike's imprint, as deep as it wasn't long, right? So it allowed, and we kind of kept the same. We kind of kept the same kind of thing for many years. It slowly evolved as kids changed, as players changed, as the game changed. I think I don't think I get a ton of credit for reinventing myself a little bit, in changing a little bit as kids got changed. I don't think we could have done it the same way. And if you talk to McRae, you can tell McRae's changed too over the years. He's not the same guy as he was. We've all seen that in sport and all of it, right? Like Ken Babcock can coach hockey the same way he did 15 years ago because it just didn't work anymore, right? And the guys that it didn't change, you can adapt. I don't think you had to change, but you had to adapt, right? And every new year, new freshmen come in, new ideas, new stuff. The one thing I guess that started to change more is the issues I had with the administration with the school. That changed probably more than the players, and it's something that I bore 100% on. I did not let Briggs Jude know anything was going on in the school. I sheltered those guys. I went through how many athletic directors? So, Bob leaves, I think, a new guy comes in, I think 99, 98. A new guy comes in, Dupree comes in for 1 year. You know what I mean? And then he's gone. And that changes. There were some really good things that happened to Dupree, but for baseball. And then I'm Lauren Davis and acting with Richard DeChatelet, acting with Chris Critelli. It just changed. I don't know how. I think I went through 8 athletic directors. And every year I had to fight budgets because we were running out of money. We were broke. You know what I mean? We're running into debt, and the hard decisions about, do we cut games? Where do we find money? And I had a problem because I worked for a government agency. There was a conflict of interest there. We had to bring in Ron Zimmerman to try to raise money. There was a ton, and I remember LePage always saying, he goes, I don't know how we get through a game. I just know I show up and the bus is here. He had no, and I absolutely, that's the stuff that wore me out, and that's the stuff that really, really took its toll, and it probably affected me more than anyone. And I get to the ballpark and I'm exhausted, or I work night shifts, and I a lot of times I would let coaches know when I was coming into that and saying, you got to pick me up. I was good at keeping them in the loop that way. But at the end of the day, players don't care. You know what I mean? They don't care. They're at the ballpark, want to play, right? And they don't know what I had to go through. They don't know how the bats got there. They don't know how the baseballs got there. All they know is there's umpires and there's a team to play and we got to win. Those things were exhausting and hard, very hard.
I have a little bit of insight into that, obviously, having dealt with not only the Brocketman, and it was way better under, Bob Davis was a supporter.
Yeah.
He was not always super friendly to Ted and I because we were brand new and we had to prove ourselves. But Richard DeShadlett, for example, was a huge supporter of us.
Yeah. Richard was fantastic. Bob was great. Bob was at the games forever. Bob was at the games, and very, very supportive. He recognized what we were doing and what we were trying to do and gave us a lot of rope. Gave us a ton of rope. And then Richard was fantastic also. Richard was, he helped a lot because he was acting at a time period where Dupree came in and kind of cleared our bank accounts, which was really important at the time. But Richard recognized championships and winning, and wanted and understood that, I had a great support group of coaches in there. Like Ken Murray was fantastic with me, and Murray Nystrom, and Mike Polino early, but Mike was gone pretty early. Murray Nystrom, and maybe because it was the core four sports kind of thing, and baseball, hockey, basketball there, you know what I mean? And they brought me in and they were awesome and they would help me through. And then Richard just recognized winning. And there was things that Richard would help me with, like, how do you there was things that we did that the school took later on, which they let us do. Like, we had our own website. It didn't bother us, right? It was a chance for us to make our own money. We're the team that got the first media guide. I did the media guide. You look at those early media, there's me, big tab, one, I had no skills that way. Like, I made them. And then Sean Whiteley eventually takes them over in the athletic department. And then all of a sudden they take it away from us and we can't do our own. We couldn't do our own website to take it away. We did that top 50 players of all time that ever played a game. You know what I mean? Like, that was us. We did that. We did our own stories. I did all those stories for David Larkins. I love him, David Larkins. I did all those stories. Walked into David Larkins' office at the Brock Press and said, "Here." Yeah, and he put it in. I was the guy that called St. Catharines Standard and said, "Here." and got all that. We had, the French TV station Volt that come in and training camp the one year, I think it was 96, 97. They come in and did a whole story on us. And, Kojko did a whole thing. Our games on television. Like, I say this, 1999 championship after we won the back-to-back game. I remember being at the bar there on Harsel Road, whatever it was called then, and now it has changed a million times. And every single time the championship game come on the sports ticker. We were on sports ticker, man. Brock beat U of T with a 12-4. Look at the ball up there. So that score's up there. And it was on that's where we went. And that is a testament to the Don Graves at McMaster and U of T, and Andy Green there, and what we did at Brock and how we just built the sport. And I did all our own press. And I was dragging Guelphs, the poor teams. We didn't care. We're going to make everybody better because it was better for the league. And that was exhausting.
Yeah.
And then we gave it to the OUA and
Well, yeah, you know, it evolves from SEBA, which was colleges and universities playing against each other, to the
Yeah.
OUA getting involved, and probably a bit of a you know a bit of the grass is greener on the other side. Jeff, tell us about what your thoughts are on OUA sanctioned baseball.
Yeah. We all thought it was going to be the golden goose of funding, right? Um, that's what the whole plan was, to be the golden goose of funding. We'll be funded. We'll be funded. We'll be funded. Um, we'll have administration to run things. SEBA, there were some really good things with SEBA. There were some really good people in SEBA, but there was also a lot of egos in SEBA, that were difficult to manage and difficult to, everyone wanted to protect their own little thing. OUA baseball was the goal. It's a smart thing. It's just, and for years, Ward Dills and the OUA was very, very good for baseball at that time. He was very understanding. He got it, and let us keep doing what we're doing. But it fell. We needed some of the things that we talked about. Provincial. We needed to get Baseball Ontario on board. We needed to get Baseball Canada on board. Other people, they didn't have any interest in that because they're only worried about what they were doing at their school in their own small little portion of that. And it needed a collective thing. It needed more voices, more support to build the sport up. But 1999 sports ticker, our baseball championship, Brock baseball games, all on Cogeco TV every week. How much bigger? We were there, and then it just, you talk to guys now with the OUA championship, it's not even close to what it was. Talent's there, there's great ball players, but it's not the same schedule. It's not the same thing, right? And it's a shame because we were there. We were there 25 years ago.
Yeah, I think the opportunity is still there to go back to the original roots of the program because the conditions for success are still there. There's a proximity to the U.S. border. There's having a good home park. There's the ability to recruit good talent. I think it's just going to come down to the next generation discovering that a Canadian-American schedule is always going to be necessary for Brock, and maybe they need to invest a little bit more on the U.S. side, because the Canadian side, the sport will only develop as far as maybe the weakest program. And
we later on we had a hard time playing the U.S. schools. Finding teams to play. We couldn't get the weekends anymore because we had OUA commitments of schedule. So we would still go Friday night to Mercyhurst every year. That when I was still there. But Erie stopped kind of playing us. We'd get them in the spring. That was always a goal, still to play some spring games. But that's cost money, exams. You didn't want to go there and get killed either. There was some years we played up to 43 games one year at Brockton. We played, I think, 9 spring games. Like we tried that. The NAI, of course, was always something in the back burner, which a lot of research was done, and it could have been done. It just needed it needed a full commitment from the university first and foremost for financial purposes. It could have been easily done. We could have easily joined just like UBC and did it that way. Flipping the schedule, we could have done both. It was there. It would have been available. The NAI said we could have done both. It just has a lot of work, and I tried, but it was bigger than me.
Yeah, Jeff, I think the ultimate dream for because the conditions are all there. The ultimate dream for the program is a field or a stadium on campus and a U.S. Canadian schedule that is robust, that allows the program to be the number one program in the country year in and year out. Now, I feel that has largely been achieved. Like, I think anyone who plays for Brock understands that there's a special factor that goes in with that. There's only been 3 head coaches in its history, all of whom were on the original coaching staff. So we're a little bit like the Pittsburgh Steelers in that regard, and that consistency of philosophy and consistency of excellence of players are measurable. Those are things that come with the uniform. Tell me a little bit about, I don't want to dive too deep into it, but your decision to walk away from the program and get heavily involved in the Intercounty Baseball League, because I think a lot of people will equally recognize you from your time with Hamilton, and now that you've really gone to the the Mecca franchise, I think, in the IBL with the Toronto Maple Leafs. And I have tons of friends that have played in the our alumni of the Leafs. Tell me a little bit about that journey.
Well, I guess after year 18, we saw year 20 coming up. It made sense. 20 years, 500 wins kind of was a number there. I think it was time to step aside and to retire from Brock. Again, administration-wise, I was starting to wear me down again. And then the 19th season hit, and I had an absolute blast. I had so much fun that year. Ricky Ferry, that group, Justin Ailes, it just made coming to the ballpark so much fun. We steamrolled everybody. We rolled to the OUA championship. It was the easiest year. We did the Halloween game, which is something I wish I would have done 15 years earlier. It was fun. So I learned how to give that team a mental break just before the grind again. And just to have fun at the ballpark. I was having fun. And then I started to kind of get cold feet and maybe change my mind. And going into year 20, I was like, I don't know if I want to go. But the school had already, we're moving forward. We're Lounsbury's finally gone. And I'm pretty sure, at the time, that's when changes can be made. It's hard to make changes when the same guy's been there for 20 years, right? But I think dollars and cents and budget cutting was one of the big things that, I've been fighting with, not fighting, but all the people like DeShadleys was gone and Ken Murray was gone. And, I had gone through another couple. Lauren Adams was gone. Critelli, me and Critelli never... We got along and there was respect there, but it was hard. It was hard with me and Chris. It always was, I felt. And then, I was tired, and I kind of started to change my mind. And the end of the season, I can honestly say I made a huge mistake. Again, learning what I know now. That's when mental health starts to become a big issue at this time frame. It's when mental health and all these things, dealing with mental health, and then there's privacy issues. And so I kept everything in. I protected the athlete, didn't share, and didn't use my assistant coaches like I had, and let them in on this. And it was something I bore the brunt of. And then, kind of made a big mistake. And, hindsight's 20/20 again, right? And looking back, 20 years was good. I should have just, said it and been done. And that was the end of it. And then, Mark takes over. And, it was hard. When you're used to doing something every September in training camp and seeing things change. And I knew right away the athletic department was going to pull stuff back. That was hard. Some of the things like stats bothered me a lot. I kept every single stat. I know Matt King went 0 for 10 or 1 for 10. Like, what I mean? Like, that was part of, I thought it was important to know every single guy that ever played a game. And you know what I mean? And the history and where guys stood in top 10s and top 20s and the historical part of it. And then I'm like, nobody wanted that information. And I'm like, and that hurt. Those kind of things I felt like minimized, I guess, a little bit. So it was a very rough 2 years afterwards. Watching the team not being part of it, I struggled with it. It was very difficult. I wish it could have gone better, but that's life. And now I'm good. Everything's good now. And then Laurier called me back, and again, Intercounty. I'm involved in baseball. I'm doing my thing, and all's good.
So you go to Laurier and coach with an old teammate of mine, Scott Valentine.
Yeah.
Scott is a hell of a good guy. I will say that. And,
Mm-hmm.
works as an accountant and very grounded, good guy. Was it really? How difficult was it for you to put on another uniform?
No, not as difficult as I thought it was going to be. It was 2 years, right? So I took 2 years off, and Scott calls me and says, we've lost in the championship 2 years in a row, or right close. We're this, we're here. You interested in, coming out of retirement and maybe helping us get over the hump? And I'm like, well, I can't drive up to Laurier for practices and stuff. He goes, no. He goes, we just come and sit on a bucket. You know what I mean? And give pearls of wisdom. And that's, I got to be good cop again, right? I got to be good cop. And it's been a long time since I got to be good cop. And, I could sit there and, kids complain, oh, I should be playing. Yeah, you should be playing. Your coach hates you. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I got to do that. I think my historical, they listened. I got to just a little bit here and a little bit there, and we won a championship right away, first year. Boom, right? They win. I help. I do my little part. Players did everything, but I did my little part. They win, and then when I come back for year two, I go, I'm just a lucky charm. I'm just a trinket. That's what I am, right? And that's how I took it. I go, that's all I am. I'm just a good luck charm. And then we won back-to-back years, and then I think we probably would have won the third year too. And that's when COVID hit, and that changes everything, right? And I did Scotty's last year, and then I wasn't going to go back for last year, but Brody, I love Brody McKay, their coach there, and he was an assistant with me the year before, and he took over and I didn't want to leave him hanging. I didn't want, I love the kid, and the kid has the same baseball mentality as I do. We kind of come from the same cloth, I guess. And Brody's a cop, and he goes, I'd love to have you back. So I did one more year. I did last year with Brody, and he's not going to be back this year. So I decided that was it. I wasn't going to go back. And then my wife and I decided to book an Italy trip at the end of this September. So
tell me about your involvement with the Leafs and intercounty. I mean, I think people who followed you know that you were involved with the Hamilton Cardinals. And, what brings you to the Toronto Maple Leafs and the legacy of Jack Domenico?
Yeah, so I did 4 years, I guess, as Hamilton's GM after coaching in Burlington for many years. As we all know, I did intercounty stints in like the late 90s to get more coaching experience. I did it again under different ownership. Every time a new owner seems to come in, I get brought in to kind of stabilize things and kind of help get their feet wet. So Hamilton changed owners. I was like, this is it. He wanted his own guy, and it was a good time to get out of Hamilton. So I thought I was done. And then I got a phone call from basically Hamilton's owner and Welland's ownership and the league, and they're all saying there's trouble in Toronto. Damon quit basically in January or February of that year. We all know that Jack had passed and the team was being run by Ty Crawford at the time. So they had no one running baseball ops, no one in the team. Players didn't know what the hell was going on. They were getting ready to jump ship. It was messy. So of course I got brought in to clean up a mess, or help clean up a mess. So I was brought in year one, which would have been last year. I hired Robbie Butler. I got lucky there. Rob, I love that kid. He's awesome. Rob Butler is, boy, I wish I would have met him many, many years ago. And it's worked really well with Rob. And it was a really good year. I had a lot of fun in Toronto. I loved Jack Domenico. He was very good to me. So I wanted to do my part in saving the franchise for the sale and helping Ty Crawford get the sale done. And then I figured I'd be done. I thought it was a one and out thing, just to stabilize, and I'll get out after a year. We had a great year. We lost at Welland, real close, Game 5. And then the team got sold. And when the team got sold, or was in the process of being sold, that group reached out to me and Rob and said, we want you two back. So Rob goes, I'll be back if Jeff comes back. And I said, well, if Rob wants me back and Rob's coming back, I guess I'll come back. And with the new owners, we're going to run it back for another year. I don't know how long I can do that for, but now I'm going to help this new ownership group get its feet wet, learn the IBL, learn what it takes to run a team here. You know, their learning curve is going to be so big. You know, the budgets and you know, the games and the schedule and all the intricacies of IBL baseball. There's a big learning curve for them, so I'll help them out with that, and I'll do another year and, you know, have some fun with it.
That's amazing, and I think that's a really good journey through your professional side of things. I think I'd like to touch on some personal stuff now. Jeff, you know, this is a harder question, obviously. So you're battling colon cancer, of which I have some direct personal experience. I watched Brad Reason, who was, you know, a thorn in the side of Brock for many years, and one of the great university players ever in Canadian university baseball, and a dear friend of mine. He battled colon cancer for a year, went through, I think, 26 rounds of chemo, and then was given a clean bill of health. And then a month after he was given a clean bill of health, while playing pool in my basement, his girlfriend came to me and said, Brad's looking a little pale and has a lump in his stomach. A week later, he was in the hospital. He never came out. 6 months later, he had passed away from just completely aggressive colon cancer. And it does not have a high survival rate, especially when it is diagnosed at a certain stage. Tell me a little bit about your emotions and being diagnosed with colon cancer and what that battle was like.
I don't know. I handled it, I think, as well as it could be expected, I guess. I never got self-pity, never got down. Again, I coach that way. Don't let your highs get too high. Don't let your lows get too low. I did the same thing. I treated treatment as if I had to go to work. This is just something I got to do. So you wake up, got to go to work. Some days are okay. Some days are decent. Some days suck. It's just like work, right? Like, you know, like it's what you got to do. And some days suck terrible. You know what I mean? But you just wake up and you got to do it. There's no negotiation. There's no nothing. You got to go to work. I use the same mentality. There is a former player of mine right now, of Brock. I hope I'm going to mention his name because he is going through a horrendous battle, Daryl Silverstein, who is going through some major health issues. Daryl reached out to me. I hoped I could help him through some very tough times. It's been very, very hard for Daryl. And he's a guy that lost his eyesight when he was he was our one-eyed catcher, bullpen catcher, and in the mid-90s, and he's going through some very strong health problems. So I hope I may have helped him a little bit more as well. And that's the way I just did it. It's just, what other choice do you have? You know, you got to fight. You got to get up and work and go to work and get it done and get on the other side of it. If it doesn't work, at least you can say you tried, right? And if we all punch the clock at some point in time, so make the best of it. You know, I tried not to be self-pity, not, oh, woe is me, why me? Try not to let it affect my, my moments with my kids or my moments with my parents. Like, I just tried to just what it is. I got lucky. It's not over yet. I'm sure. I still haven't been totally whooshed of it. I'm getting closer. It's almost been 5 years now. But it was hard, and Brad's story isn't the only one. There was an umpire from Brantford, Jamie Cork, I think it was, OUA championship. He's like, "Hey Jeff, I heard you had cancer. And good to see you out here." And I'm at the OUA championships, and he's like, "Yeah, Yeah, I go, how you doing? He goes, oh, back's killing me. It's really sore. I can't wait for this weekend to be over. It's the end. This is it. I'm done at the end of the year. It's October, right? Right. He passed away in like December, January that year. Colon cancer. He had colon cancer. That was a back problem. You know what I mean? So it's I can't. It's happening younger and younger and younger. 50 isn't. I don't. I think 40 is the new 50 in that aspect, in that care. And you have to advocate for your own health. It's something my wife always said to me. You have to advocate for your own health. No one else will. So, mentally, I was always strong. I've never been, again, a woe is me kind of guy. So just, it is what it is. We all have our own stories. We all have our own battles, and just enjoy every minute. Appreciate what you have. Appreciate where you are and what you've done, and the people that have been part of your life. And that's the one thing I guess now. I guess to say, you're talking about Brock in the 20 years. I appreciate the players and the people that went through those 20 years. Second to none. And there are players that have greater memories, and there are players that I can giggle at, and there's players that were a pain in my ass, but they were all a part of the whole story, right? They're all part of the whole story, and they all carry, like Dougie Whiteside. We talk about how difficult he was, but at the end of the day, if it wasn't for Dougie Whiteside, I probably couldn't have handled other guys like him later on. You know what I mean? He helped me in a long way, and Dougie's done really well for himself. And I know Doug, we've talked at least once, and he kind of, I'm sorry for, you didn't deserve that. Adam Vella, another player that I absolutely loved, and Adam Vella, he pimped the double. He started the 1 year and stole like 15 bases in the first like 2 weeks of the year, and he pimps the double. It was a triple, right? He pimps it in the second to give the WWF belt sign or whatever. And I did a Mike McRae. I freaked, right? and I got into him. I'm like, Adam, Jesus. You know what Adam Vella's response was? He didn't steal another base for the rest of the year. That was his response. And Adam Vella, years later, comes up and he goes, what the hell was I thinking? You know what I mean? Like, and I'm supposed, he goes, I'm supposed to be a great teammate, and I love these guys, and that was my response to that. You know what I mean? And Adam spoke at a banquet years later about that moment. And it was such a learning. So it shaped who Adam Vella was. You know what I mean? And he turns out to, I love that kid. You know what I mean? Like, so I can talk. Andrew Tinish. I won't tell him getting shot story. I'll let him tell that, or someone else tell that story. That's a Daryl Kemp story. It was, everyone makes mistakes. Everybody is growing. Everyone is learning every day. And I think that's what I've learned finally, and accepted that, yeah, I made mistakes 100%. I cut guys. Wrong pitcher change, start the wrong guy in this championship game, whatever. Like, but it wasn't because I wasn't trying. It wasn't because I didn't care. It wasn't because
Jeff, it's the reverse. So it came up in Todd and I's podcast, and I think it's a great way for us to cap this one off. So Todd obviously goes through this trauma of losing his eyesight in his eye, thanks to one of the more freak accidents anyone will ever come up with. But he wins an award for most dedicated player at the end of the year. But it turns out that, it's a year later. So there's a banquet, and Todd is actually on his first date with his to-be wife, and is going to school in Buffalo, and doesn't make it to the banquet. But his father-in-law gives you a call as Todd is getting married, and you arrange for Todd's most dedicated player award, probably which wasn't on hand at the time, or maybe it was, I don't know. But you arranged to get that to Todd's wedding, which, would have touched the lives of everyone who attended the wedding. And that is going above and beyond at a level that is befitting of the spirit of that first Brock team. And when he told me that on our podcast segment, and I'd be the first guy to admit that, life moved pretty quickly for me after Brock. Where Ted and I are running a league where, I could talk at end, about SEBA until I was blue in the face about some of the personalities and the egos there. But the truth of the matter is, I don't have to say it much further than we got Rawlings Major League Baseballs donated to every team in the country, and the entire East Coast refused to use them. That was kind of our SEBA experience captured in a little, a guy named Bill Martin just said, we're not using these. Rawlings are not good balls. We're like, they're the Major League model baseballs, and they were donated to us. You'll use them. And they just steadfastly refused. So that was kind of a small snippet of what our SEBA experience was like. But we quickly moved on to having to grow up and live lives. But when you hear something like that, and I know how hard it was to just get through 1 year of Brock baseball, never mind 20 of them. It says so much about you as a person that people don't know. They see you in uniform. You have to do all the things that coaches have to do. Cut people, play people over other people that were probably hoping to be on the field. Sometimes that leads to difficult feelings, and people have unique perspectives on coaches or experiences. But if you look at the sum of your contributions, there's nobody that has done a better job for a program than you have done. And, I think the foundation that was set in 95 owes you the biggest thank you for generations now of players that have come through that Brock program. And I think you're one of if it's possible for Jeff Lounsbury to be underrated in the Brock history, I think
Thank you.
You are. And, we're all going to be either sending you the biggest video greeting while you're off in Italy or seeing you in person. But, after 30 years, it'd be great to get the team together a few times leading into this event. And there's probably a whole bunch of us that are going to, get caught up because some people we haven't seen in 30 years. And it'll be fun to see a Matt King. It'll be fun to see. I've seen a fair number of people, as you know. But you're the one who put together the Halls of Fame. You're the one who put together the alumni events. You've been the one consistent participant in Brock as opposed to those people who plugged in for a small time. And we all owe you a big debt of gratitude.
I appreciate it, Mike. It would be nice to be back involved in some aspect. I don't control those things anymore. It's not my program. But I appreciate the kind words. I've said this before. I won 0 games. Players won 500. It's the kids. It's the kids. Putting them together and putting them all in the field together, yeah, that's my job. But at the end of the day, they throw it, they hit it, they run it. There's very few times that it comes down to a coaching decision. maybe I won one game the day I flipped Ryan Cairns from third base to second base and Dana Durrell the second to third for a double play ball that we actually got and turned to double play. So maybe one. I did it twice actually, but it's a very funny story of that era, the generation. I went out and talked to a pitcher, and I flipped my second baseman and shortstop around just because my third baseman had a cannon, and turned it up a play real well, and it worked.
It's always amazing when things work. I will say this, as a player, I've never gone into coaching. I tried to, a couple of scholarship kids brought me in as a tutor, and my patience level for them was 0. So that lasted about 2 sessions where I was like, okay, you can't have. I remember the one kid specifically said to me, I said to him, how many pitches do you have? And he said 6. I said, and how many of them do you throw well? And so I sat behind the catcher and watched, and pitches 3, 4, 5, and 6 all looked like the same spinner that was going to get hit. So it was right then and there. I was kind of like, I don't think I was cut out for this, because at a certain point, I'm all about your attitude more than anything. You better be a vicious competitor, or my tolerance level was not very good. So, but I will say this, players do play and players do win and lose games, but coaches set players up for success. And it was the most important thing, one of the more important things I learned from my high school coach, where Ted and I played at Dwyer, where he would meet with the players individually and say to them, these are the conditions in which I see you being successful. This is what I need you to do. And I've never been on a team that overachieved more than that high school team, where we knocked off 3 of the top 10 Metro ranked high school teams from a little Catholic school that never won more than 3 games. And I feel that coaching is so undervalued, because you guys put people into positions on the field and in life where they can feel the confidence to be successful. And the measure of the 1995 Brock team is not just the accomplishments on the field, it's the accomplishments in life. And when you see what Todd is doing, and we catch up with Colin Tyler, we've talked to Joel Garden, I've talked to Chris Peters, we just did one with Briggs Jude, but I was talking to the Houston boys. Everybody carried forth a foundation of understanding a blueprint for them to be successful in their own lives based off of that experience. And that is something that is owed to the commitment of all of the coaches. Coach McRae on through, you guys have helped create a special group of about 30 people. If you count some of the JV players, you got to remember that one of the guys that actually moved onto the team, I think, was the only ever Brock JV player who graduated and became a key player on the varsity team, which was Dan Pino, who came the year after. I think that you're underestimating just what an effect coaching has in that overall mix for success in life. And the real championship ring that 95 team is wearing is the one that's carrying people through life, and they're being difference makers. They're being great committed family people. They have, daughters and sons that are out there. It's amazing to me. Doug Lunny, who was a competitor at MAC, his son's now playing at Brock, which is kind of one of the weird ironies of life. I think that these are all a testament to a time where it was a lot for all of us. We all learned together, but there's an underlying love and respect for each other now that is going to bring us back together. And I think people's lives are their stat sheet. And I want to thank you for being a difference maker for not just our team, but for the subsequent teams that have come. And thank you for your time.
No
today,
problem.
Jeff.
This is always fun going down memory lane. It's been a while since I wore a Brock t-shirt. I'm wearing one today. This lady here. It's our training camp t-shirt for many, many years. It's been a while. I'm grateful for my time there. I'm grateful for the memories, and it's I guess it's good to see everybody. It's good to hear the stories. There's guys that I'm still in touch with quite a bit, and there's some great stories when I do run into guys, and sometimes it's the Brian Sewells, or it's not always 95. It could be from many, many different years, but it's always great to hear the stories and see what they're up to, and I'm thankful for being a small part of that.
Well, I think it's safe to say a few of us will drop by Christie Pitts in the
Yeah, that'd be
summer.
great to actually see that happen. I'm there on the Sundays. Don't catch me on a Wednesday night out there, but I'm there on the Sundays.
Well, for sure, it's I had to pitch against Rob, which was him and his brother were not a lot of fun to play, and
You, you
both could
know,
swing. And
sorry, Mike. There's one thing I did want to say. There's something I was always proud of, and I don't talk about it much, but how many Brock players have went on to coach at a high level and still played
mm-hmm.
for a very, very long time. We saw so many junior college guys come back to Brock, and or guys that went to the States, and they hated the game, or the game kind of just, you know what I mean? And a lot of guys at the time, this brought back the love of the game and the love of the sport and the competition. But, Stefan Strecker pitching into his 40s, Mark Cheeseman pitching into his 40s, Ben Anderson's coaching college, Ian Balla's coaching, at the Ontario Terriers. I can go on and on. Matt Barrett playing like professional slow pitch. You know what I mean? I can go on and on and on about how many guys that I've, over the years, Colin Tyler, Coach OBJ. We all know Tennis's story, of course, but how many guys were still involved in baseball well past their playing days, or still playing many, many years later, Jeremy Walker and whatever. That was always something I was very, very proud of how many guys gave back to the game. And,
Yeah, I think it's I had the privilege of playing until I was 36, and played some stateside, and played in Tecumseh with a couple of guys that came later, Matt Stazicki, and played on
Stazicki and Gillen. Stazicki, Gillen, and Presley were eating up Windsor for years, or Tecumseh.
Yeah. It was a really weird organization to play in, and I've kind of got an off. I can't repeat on this podcast, but some elements of that team that were crazy. But was in London area for a long time, so we were part of. You may remember this. I don't think most people, but in the IBL there was a St. Thomas Storm expansion team, and so me and a guy named Mike Bushby were involved with that, and it just, for me, it was always a competitive, cathartic experience, right? This was started essentially because my brother had died, and I felt that Brock was a replacement for the experience I was being robbed of by a car accident. And so for me, it was an emotional experience. So all year was really just expelling grief. But, as I've dug in on, and for me, I thought, well, this is an experience no one else is going to live. But then, as I dig into the history of the McMaster program, that the founder was killed 2 years after he started the program when a wheel came off of a transport truck in Texas. And, so every baseball program has been touched by tragedy, or it's just life, right? It's a reflection of life. But what I do know is the people that I still connect with today, when we see each other, it's like 30 years didn't exist. It's like we're sitting in a dugout back in 95, probably laughing at the George Brown first baseman or whatever.
With his running shoes and his wife in the stands.
The running shoes, or the knee pad on the outside of the, or getting into it with Canisius and or in the back of a van. And it's like no time has gone by. We all just revert back to that time period, and it's special. And that's why we're revisiting it, because for all of us, as we listen to everyone's story, it's not real shocking to me that Colin Tyler is an educator. He was kind of that, and he's still involved. It's not super shocking to me at all that Ted Gendron is the CEO of a company that supports youth sports across 100 clubs across the province. it's not shocking to me that Rob Green is president and CEO of one of the biggest corporate benefits companies in the province, and he built it up with his own hands. That was always Rob. Not shocking to me that Chris Ebel is involved with the police in being a metered and thoughtful guy when it comes to training police officers. Nothing shocks me at a certain point, because the elements that made for great adults were there as great players. And this is an absolutely true statement, and I would think that there'd be little to no resistance on it, which is the group of people that were the first team. By the time they came to that end of the year, they had either grown or performed at levels that they had never seen. And I can't think of anyone that didn't either grow up as an adult or perform on the field, or at least learn so much from that first year that it served them well in life. And, it'll be interesting, as we dive into people like Daryl Houston, who, hey, look at, I can speak this because Daryl will say it. Daryl was the MVP of Team Ontario and came into Brock and either tore or sprained his ankle ligaments 2 weeks before training camp, and never really had the year that he wanted to. And, was super talented. It was super talented guy, but he was hurt and didn't have a great year by his standard, for sure. But where Daryl Houston's greatness is now measured is in the measure of his life after baseball. He's living in Vancouver, out on the West Coast, and he's become an outdoor enthusiast. He's got kids and a family that he's very invested in, and he's achieved that life balance and dedicated his passions to other things. But that all springs out of learning to, in this case, deal with adversity. So I think it's underestimated, but I think as we dive deeper into these things, Jeff, I think we'll see that, that experience of pioneering or being the first has benefited all of us in life in a way that we can't measure until you look back.
Sure.
Thank you, sir, for your time, and looking great. Best of health. And
all right, Michael, thank you very much. See ya.
Well, the smell